Good evening. Today I thought of reminding you of how to write an explanatory text. Okay, and remember, it's an explanation text. So the purpose or the target is that all the time you're explaining something. Either you're explaining a process, like how something works, or you're explaining how something is produced, how something is made. At the end of the day, you're explaining something. I chose you this topic. Well, we can know from the headline it's about breathing process. The title says, how do we breathe? And this is one of the things that we can start commenting about, that in an explanation text, the title or the headline should be in a question form. Like this one, how do we breathe? Let's start and see what we wrote here. Place your hands on your stomach and feel it expand as you inhale, then let it contract and deflate as you exhale. That cycle happens on average 720 times an hour, more than 17,000 times a day, without you even thinking about it. The first introductory paragraph, I would like to comment on two things. If I start with a bossy verb, it's addressing the reader. You're talking to the reader. This is what I call using second person. Ask yourself one question. Who are you talking to? When you say place your hands, you're talking to the reader. We use this technique of addressing the reader directly to grab the reader's attention, actually. So it's a very good attention grabber to start with. It's a very good technique to include in the introduction, talking to the reader directly. Another thing I would like to comment on is, what's the good point about including numbers? Remember, we said that this is an explanatory text. So as long as you're explaining, you need to include factual information, you need to include numbers like those, you need to include statistics. It's good to include results of researches and studies, because this makes your writing more trustworthy, because you're telling the reader that this is based on science, it's based on scientific information. Okay, let's proceed. The nose, trachea, and lungs are the main organs which make up the respiratory system. I would like to stop here because maybe one of the students would say, Miss, it's really silly to put such a piece of information, but I say no, it's not, because don't ever assume that the reader knows everything. This is again an explanation text, so your job, your mission is to explain. So just don't assume the reader knows everything, and it's good to include such basic information to explain to the reader, as if you're explaining to someone who doesn't know anything about the topic. You're explaining from scratch. So it's good to include this. This system allows the exchange of gases which are needed for us to live. And then here we use the word first. And first here, it's a sequential connective. What's a sequential connective? Now look at the words. Sequential, connective. We know that connective is a conjunction. It's a linking word. The job of this connective is to link the paragraph here to the following paragraph. It's a linker. Why do we call it sequential? Because it shows the sequence. It shows the sequence of the process. What happens first, what happens next, and what happens third. So first, breathing happens when the brain sends a message through the nerves to the intercostal muscles which lie between the ribs and diaphragm. And for the word diaphragm, the G is silent, we don't pronounce it. Diaphragm. When the instruction is received, the muscles pull the ribs outwards and the diaphragm relaxes so that the space in the chest gets bigger. Because the pressure in the chest gets lower, air rushes in to fill the lungs. And here my sentence starts with because. Because is also a connective. Remember what we said about first? First is a connective because it links this paragraph to this paragraph. Okay? Because is also a connective, but it links this sentence to the following one. So this conjunction or connective, it's linking two sentences, but this conjunction, it's linking two paragraphs. Fine? Do you think we're going to call it sequential connective? No, because it doesn't show the sequence. It doesn't show the sequence. First shows the sequence of the process. First, second, then, and so on. But because we call it causal connective. Causal because it gives the reason. It gives the cause. Why? Why this thing happens? Why does the air rush in to fill the lungs? Why? Because the pressure in the chest gets lower. So remember, in an explanation text, you will find yourself using, and it's a must to use both sequential and causal connectives. This air is taken in first through the nose and the mouth, because this is where the breathing process happens. It starts from the nose and the mouth, and then it travels into the throat, okay, which is the pharynx. I'll tell you a small tip here. I found some difficulty pronouncing the word, so I wrote myself a note how to pronounce it. It's pharynx. This is how I wrote it for myself to remember how to say it, okay? And on through the voice box, which is the larynx. And I wrote it like this on a piece of paper that you can't see, but I decided to be honest about it. It might be a learning tip for someone. So this is pharynx and this is larynx. The opening to the voice box has a cover over it called the epiglottis. You might ask me a question here. Miss, this is English, and we're writing an explanation text. Why should we include so much science, like the pharynx and the larynx and the epiglottis? Well, I'll take you to this part. We're using technical words. We have to use technical words because we're talking about science. This is not any piece of writing. This is an explanation text. It has to be scientific. This cover opens when a breath is taken. In this way, the air is able to flow down the trachea, but food is kept out. After passing down the trachea, the air travels into the lung, down, either the right or left bronchus, through the bronchioles, and at last into tiny air sacs called alveoli. These are covered with small blood vessels called capillaries. Again, if you notice, I insisted on including all the technical terminology. You have to write it because this is what we call technical vocabulary, or, scientific terminology. We do use it, yes, because it shows that we're talking about a scientific topic and we did a good research before writing. So it's a sign of good preparation and it's a sign of a good background, good knowledge. Okay, where did we stop? Here. From here, oxygen is finally taken into the bloodstream and carbon dioxide is passed back to the lungs. The intercostal muscles then push the rib cage back inwards. As a result, now we have the opportunity to remember again. We're using connectives, linking words. Which type is this one? Sequential or causal? Yes, it is a causal connective because it's talking about giving reasons and results. It's the same. As a result, the space in the chest gets smaller. As if you're answering the question, why does the space in the chest get smaller? Okay? The pressure rises, thus pushing the carbon dioxide back out of the lungs. And it all happens in the shape of a single breath. Okay, I just put a small bubble here to remind you of the very, very important and essential language features to use when writing explanatory texts. You must be sure that you're using present tense, except if you're referring to something that happened in the past. Like, let's say if you're writing an explanation text about how a volcano erupted, for instance, 3 years ago. So you have to use the past in this case. But usually we use the present. You're using conjunctions, and I'm reminding you, you're going to use time connectives, or we call them sequential, and plus causal. Technical words, and another word for technical words is jargon. Jargon, it means technical vocab. And then you must be sure that your paragraphs are sequenced. When you go through the writing, when you go through the paragraph, you will find that it follows a sequence. It follows the chronological order of how the process takes place, how the process happens, how it occurs. I hope this will help you while writing your explanations. Thank you for listening and watching.